year is 1914. Europe stands at the height of its power. Its capitals shine with confidence and pride. London rules the seas. Paris glows with culture and military ambition. Berlin rises as an industrial titan. Vienna still clings to imperial grandeur. St. Petersburg dreams of influence and expansion. To the ordinary eye, Europe appears civilized, stable, and prosperous. But beneath this polished surface, the continent is a powder keg. Old rivalries burn quietly. Empires compete for dominance. National pride turns into dangerous arrogance. Military leaders speak openly of glory, honor, and war. The people do not yet realize that they are standing on the edge of one of the darkest chapters in human history. A single bullet will soon ignite a fire that consumes the world. This is the story of World War I, the war that changed warfare forever, the war that destroyed empires, the war that gave birth to the modern battlefield, the war that transformed the 20th century. At the beginning of the 20th century, Europe was a continent divided by ambition. The great powers had spent decades building empires across the globe. Britain controlled vast territories stretching from India to Africa. France expanded its colonial power in North and West Africa. Germany, newly unified and rapidly industrializing, wanted its own place in the imperial order. Russia sought influence over Eastern Europe and the Balkans. Austria-Hungary struggled desperately to hold together a fragile empire made up of many ethnic groups and national identities. Every nation wanted more land, more power, more prestige. This hunger created tension everywhere. At the center of this tension was nationalism. People increasingly identified themselves by nation, ethnicity, and language. For some, nationalism inspired unity. For others, it created rebellion. Nowhere was this more dangerous than in the Balkans. Often called the powder keg of Europe, the Balkans had become a zone of intense conflict. The weakening Ottoman Empire had left a vacuum. Serbia, Bulgaria, Greece, and other states fought over territory and identity. Austria-Hungary feared Serbian nationalism because it threatened to inspire Slavic populations within its own borders. Russia supported Serbia as a fellow Slavic nation. Germany stood behind Austria-Hungary. Britain and France watched carefully. The alliances were already forming. One crisis could pull the entire continent into war, and that is exactly what happened. The most dangerous element in Europe was not simply rivalry, it was the system of alliances. These agreements were designed to prevent war. Instead, they ensured that if war came, it would spread rapidly. On one side stood the Triple Alliance: Germany, Austria, Hungary, Italy. On the other stood the Triple Entente: Britain, France, Russia. These alliances promised military support in the event of attack. What seemed like security was actually a trap. Every nation knew that a conflict involving one power could quickly involve many others. Diplomacy became increasingly fragile. Military planning became more aggressive. Each country developed strategies for rapid mobilization. Armies grew larger. Weapons production increased. Rail networks were expanded to move troops quickly. Europe was not preparing for peace. It was preparing for war. Even ordinary citizens could feel the tension. Newspapers published stories warning of foreign threats. Politicians used patriotic speeches to strengthen national unity. Military parades filled the streets. War was increasingly romanticized. Young men imagined glory. Few understood the horror that modern weapons would unleash. The spark came on June 28, 1914. Archduke Franz Ferdinand, heir to the Austro-Hungarian throne, visited Sarajevo in Bosnia. The visit was politically sensitive. Bosnia had been annexed by Austria-Hungary, angering Serbian nationalists. Among them was a young man named Gavrilo Princip. He was part of a nationalist movement that wanted to unite Slavic peoples and resist Austro-Hungarian control. That morning, several conspirators waited along the Archduke's route. An earlier assassination attempt failed, but fate intervened. Later in the day, the Archduke's driver took a wrong turn. The car stopped near Princip, standing only a few feet away. Princip drew his pistol. He fired 2 shots. One struck Franz Ferdinand, the other hit his wife, Sophie. Both died. Those 2 bullets changed history. Austria-Hungary blamed Serbia. Germany offered full support through what became known as the blank check. Austria-Hungary issued a harsh ultimatum: Serbia accepted most demands but rejected some conditions. It was enough. On July 28, 1914, Austria-Hungary declared war on Serbia. The alliance system activated like falling dominoes. Russia mobilized for Serbia. Germany declared war on Russia. Germany declared war on France. Germany invaded Belgium. Britain declared war on Germany. Within days, Europe was at war. Within weeks, much of the world followed. Germany's military leadership believed speed was everything. Its greatest fear was a two-front war against France in the west and Russia in the east. To solve this, Germany relied on the Schlieffen Plan. The strategy was simple in theory. Germany would quickly defeat France in the west before Russia could fully mobilize. Then it would move its forces eastward. The plan required a rapid invasion through neutral Belgium. This decision proved critical. Belgium resisted fiercely. Its resistance delayed German progress. More importantly, Britain entered the war because it had pledged to protect Belgian neutrality. The war that Germany hoped to win quickly began to slow. French and British forces regrouped. In September 1914, the German advance was stopped at the First Battle of the Marne. This was one of the most important turning points of the war. Paris was saved. Germany's hopes for a swift victory collapsed. The war would not be short. It would become a brutal struggle of endurance. After the Battle of the Marne, both sides tried to outflank each other. This phase became known as the Race to the Sea. Armies moved northward, each trying to gain strategic advantage, but every movement was countered. Eventually, the front line stretched from the North Sea to the Swiss border. Hundreds of miles of fortified positions emerged. The trenches began. This was no temporary defense. It became the defining image of the war. The Western Front hardened into a line of mud, wire, and death. Before World War I, wars often involved movement and maneuver. This war became different. Modern firepower made open movement almost suicidal. Machine guns could fire hundreds of rounds per minute. Artillery shells rained destruction across entire landscapes. Barbed wire blocked infantry assaults. Any soldier crossing open ground became an easy target. To survive, armies dug into the earth. The trench system soon became highly complex. There was the frontline trench, where soldiers faced the enemy. Behind it were support trenches and reserve trenches. Communication trenches connected them. Bunkers, dugouts, machine gun nests, and observation posts were built. The battlefield became an underground fortress. Life inside these trenches was unimaginable. Mud swallowed boots, water filled the floor, rats fed on corpses, lice infested uniforms. Disease spread quickly. The smell of death was constant. Soldiers lived beside dead comrades for days, sometimes weeks. Rain made everything worse. Entire trenches collapsed into mud. Men drowned in shell holes. Exhaustion became normal. Yet this was daily life for millions. Imagine waking every morning not knowing whether you will survive the day. That was the reality of trench life. A soldier's day often began before dawn. This period was called stand to. Troops prepared for a possible enemy attack in the low light of morning. Every man stood ready with rifle and bayonet. Then came long hours of waiting. Waiting under artillery fire. Waiting in freezing rain. Waiting in silence. Sometimes the most terrifying part was the waiting itself. Food was poor. Bread often arrived stale. Tea was muddy. Water was limited. Medical care was basic. Letters from home became priceless. They offered emotional survival, a reminder that another world still existed beyond the mud. Despite everything, soldiers formed deep bonds. They joked, shared stories, protected one another. Friendship became a form of resistance against despair. These relationships often meant the difference between survival and mental collapse. Between opposing trenches lay a deadly strip of land. This was no man's land, a wasteland of shell craters, shattered trees, corpses, barbed wire, and mud. Crossing it was almost a death sentence. When commanders ordered attacks, soldiers climbed ladders and went over the top. They advanced in waves, straight into machine gun fire. Entire units could be destroyed within minutes. The most infamous example came during the Battle of the Somme in 1916. On the first day alone, British forces suffered around 60,000 casualties. Nearly 20,000 were killed. It remains one of the bloodiest days in British military history. The scale of loss shocked the world, but the war continued, again and again, wave after wave. Attack after attack, the ground itself became soaked with blood. World War I marked the beginning of industrialized warfare. Technology advanced faster than military tactics. This created unprecedented slaughter. The machine gun became one of the deadliest weapons. A single machine gun team could stop hundreds of advancing soldiers. Then came heavy artillery. Artillery caused the majority of battlefield deaths. Massive barrages preceded infantry assaults. Entire villages disappeared under shell fire. The psychological effect was devastating. Continuous shelling drove many soldiers into mental collapse. This condition became known as shell shock. Today, it is understood as a form of PTSD. Then came poison gas. Chlorine gas was first used on a large scale in 1915. Later came phosgene and mustard gas. Gas attacks caused blindness, burns, and agonizing death. Gas masks became essential. Even then, fear remained constant. Soldiers never knew when the wind might carry death toward them. Airplanes also entered warfare for the first time. Initially used for reconnaissance, they soon evolved into fighters and bombers. Pilots became symbols of courage and prestige. The skies became another battlefield. And finally, the tank appeared. Introduced by Britain in 1916, tanks were designed to cross trenches and crush barbed wire. Though primitive, they represented the future of warfare. Beyond maps and strategies lies the true story of war, human suffering. Millions of soldiers left home believing the war would end by Christmas. Instead, they entered years of horror. Families waited endlessly for letters. Many never came. Mothers lost sons. Wives lost husbands. Children grew up without fathers. Entire villages lost a generation of young men. Hospitals overflowed. Nurses worked without rest. Doctors performed emergency surgeries under unimaginable pressure. Civilian populations also suffered. Cities faced shortages. Factories turned to war production. Women entered workplaces in massive numbers. Society itself began to change. War was no longer only fought by soldiers. Entire nations were mobilized. This was total war. By the end of the first phase of World War I, one truth had become painfully clear. This would not be a quick war. This would be a war of endurance, a war of machines, a war of trenches, a war of attrition. The old world was dying. Empires trembled. Millions were trapped in a conflict unlike anything history had seen before, and the worst was still to come. By 1916, the war had entered a new and darker phase. The early hopes of quick victory were long gone. The trenches remained locked in a deadly stalemate, and military leaders on both sides searched desperately for a breakthrough. Germany believed it had found one. In February 1916, the German High Command launched one of the most brutal offensives in military history, Battle of Verdun. The architect behind this strategy was General Erich von Falkenhayn. His objective was not merely to capture land. His plan was to destroy the French army through attrition. He believed France would defend Verdun at any cost because of its symbolic importance. If Germany attacked there relentlessly, France would continue sending men into battle until it collapsed. It was a chilling strategy. Not conquest, exhaustion. Not movement, bleeding an entire nation. The attack began with a devastating artillery bombardment. Millions of shells fell on French positions. The earth shook continuously. Entire villages vanished. Forests that had stood for centuries were reduced to broken stumps and burning splinters. The sky turned black with smoke. The ground became a shattered lunar landscape. Then came the infantry. German soldiers advanced through the smoke and ruins. Fort Douaumont, one of the strongest French forts, fell early in the battle. The situation became desperate. But France refused to yield. General Philippe Pétain took command of the defense. He organized one of the most effective logistical operations of the war. The Voie Sacrée, the sacred road, became the lifeline of Verdun. Thousands of trucks moved day and night. Fresh troops moved in. The wounded moved out. Ammunition, food, and supplies flowed continuously. French resistance hardened around a single phrase: Ils ne passeront pas. They shall not pass. For 10 months, Verdun became a furnace of steel and death. Every hill, every trench, every ruined fort, every crater, fought over repeatedly. Soldiers lived under constant bombardment. Some units lost nearly all their men within days. Many never even saw the enemy. Artillery alone killed them. By December 1916, the battle finally subsided. Neither side had achieved decisive victory, but the cost was horrific, around 700,000 casualties. Verdun became more than a battle. It became a symbol of national endurance. It also demonstrated that modern war could devour entire armies without changing the map significantly. While Verdun consumed French forces, the Allies planned a major offensive to relieve pressure. This became the Battle of the Somme. British and French commanders hoped a massive coordinated assault would break German lines. For days, artillery thundered across the front. The Allies believed this bombardment had destroyed German trenches and cut barbed wire. The reality was devastatingly different. German defenses remained largely intact. Deep bunkers had protected troops. Machine guns survived. Barbed wire still stretched across no man's land. Then came 1st July 1916. At dawn, whistles blew. Thousands of British soldiers climbed out of their trenches. They advanced in formation. Many had been told the artillery had done its work. Some even walked rather than ran. The German machine guns opened fire. What followed was catastrophe. Men fell in waves. Entire units were cut down in minutes. The first day of the Somme became one of the bloodiest in British military history. More than 57,000 British casualties, nearly 20,000 dead in a single day. The offensive continued for months. Again and again, soldiers advanced through mud and shell fire. The land became a wasteland. No trees, no buildings, only craters and bodies. Yet the Somme also introduced a revolutionary weapon. In September 1916, Britain deployed the tank for the first time. These machines were slow, unreliable, and mechanically fragile. Some broke down almost immediately, but their impact on military imagination was enormous. For the first time, armies saw a machine capable of crossing trenches, crushing wire, and protecting infantry. The future of mechanized warfare had begun. By the end of the battle, over 1 million casualties had been suffered by both sides. The territorial gains were limited, but strategically, the Somme weakened German forces and revealed the future of a combined arms warfare. While Europe bled in the trenches, another major front opened far from France. The Allies sought to strike the Ottoman Empire through the Dardanelles. This campaign became the Gallipoli campaign. The objective was strategic and political. Capture the strait, open a route to Russia, knock the Ottoman Empire out of the war. The initial naval assault failed. Mines destroyed ships. Coastal artillery inflicted severe losses. The Allies then launched a land invasion. British, French, Australian, and New Zealand troops landed on the Gallipoli Peninsula. The beaches were narrow. The terrain was steep and unforgiving. Ottoman forces held the high ground. Among the Ottoman commanders was Mustafa Kemal Ataturk. His leadership became legendary. The Allied landings quickly bogged down into trench warfare. Heat, disease, lack of water, and constant sniper fire devastated troops. The campaign turned into months of deadlock. Eventually, the Allies evacuated. Gallipoli was a major strategic failure, yet its legacy was immense. For Australia and New Zealand, it became central to national memory. For the Ottoman Empire, it was a defining victory. World War I was fought not only on land but also across the oceans. Britain's naval power was one of its greatest strategic advantages. The Royal Navy imposed a blockade on Germany. This blockade targeted food, fuel, and industrial materials. Over time, it weakened Germany's economy and civilian morale. Germany responded with a revolutionary weapon, the U-boat. Submarine warfare changed naval strategy forever. German submarines targeted Allied merchant ships and military transports. This brought war directly into global trade routes. One of the most famous incidents was the sinking of the RMS Lusitania. The ship carried civilians, including Americans. Its sinking shocked international opinion. At sea, the major fleet engagement came at the Battle of Jutland. This was the largest naval battle of the war. Though Germany performed strongly tactically, Britain maintained strategic control. The blockade remained. This proved that naval warfare could determine the economic fate of nations. For the first time in history, war extended into the skies. Aircraft began the war as reconnaissance tools. Pilots observed enemy troop positions and artillery. This intelligence became essential. Soon, both sides sought to deny the enemy this advantage. This led to aerial combat. Dogfights became iconic. Pilots gained fame and reputation. Among the most famous was Manfred von Richthofen. The Red Baron became a symbol of German air power. Bombing raids also began. Railways, factories, and cities became targets. The concept of strategic air warfare was born. The war forced commanders to rethink everything. Mass infantry charges had produced catastrophic losses. New tactics emerged. One of the most important was the creeping barrage. Artillery fire moved forward in timed stages. Infantry advanced closely behind. This offered temporary cover. Another innovation was stormtrooper tactics. German infiltration units moved in smaller, flexible groups. They bypassed strong points and targeted weak areas. This was far more modern than rigid formations. Communication systems also improved. Field telephones, signal flares, runners, pigeons. Every method mattered. Logistics became a science. Railways and supply chains often determined success. Modern warfare had become a coordinated machine. World War I spread across continents. Battles occurred in Africa, the Middle East, and Asia. Colonial troops fought in Europe and abroad. Indian soldiers fought on the Western Front. African regiments served in multiple campaigns. The Middle East became strategically critical. British forces fought Ottoman troops in Mesopotamia and Palestine. The Arab Revolt further challenged Ottoman control. This made the conflict truly global. It was the first industrial war fought on multiple continents. Behind every strategy lay human suffering. Every decision by generals translated into casualties. Families waited for letters that never arrived. Hospitals overflowed. Doctors worked continuously. Shell shock spread widely. Thousands returned home psychologically shattered. The war changed medicine, logistics, and military doctrine. But above all, it changed human lives forever. By the end of 1916, World War I had become a conflict of machines, strategy, and global destruction. The battlefield had evolved, so had warfare itself. But the war was far from over. The greatest political and military upheavals were still ahead. A reminder of the cost of ambition, a reminder of the price of war, a reminder that modern warfare was born in the fields of World War I.